Hello and welcome once again to the video. This one, of course, sees the return of the Formula One World Championship. And just as I have done over the last 2 years, I will be taking a little brief look at each race, just the results, and just a little simple look from a fan's perspective at how I think it all went down, basically. Just taking my watch off. That's better. Okay, so as with previous years, I'm going to write down the finishing order and then the championship positions for both drivers and teams. Okay, so let's go. Race 1. Bahrain. Make sure this is in focus. Okay. So, 1. Verstappen. Perez. Sainz. Leclerc. Russell. Norris. Hamilton. How is that in focus? Let me just see if I can just get that perfectly in focus there. Hopefully that's okay. Okay. 8th, Piastri. 9th, Alonso. 10th, Stroll. 11, Joe. Magnussen. 11, Bottas. And Sargent. Okay, let's have a little drink. Okay. So, championship positions, pretty simple. Verstappen, 26. Perez, 18. Third, of course, is Sainz, 15. 4th, Leclerc, on 12. 5th, Russell, 10. 6, Norris, 8, Hamilton, 6, Piastri 4, Alonso 2, Stroll 1. Okay, now the rundown in the Constructors' Championship. Let's have a look, make sure that's still. Okay, so we have Redbull, of course, on maximum 44. Ferrari 27. Mercedes 16. McLaren on 12. Aston Martin on 3. Okay, oh, I'm sorry. Over there, just knocked. Oh, and again, just knocked the camera a little bit. Okay, so what did we think of that race? Just put in here, fastest lap, of course, was Max Verstappen. He was also on pole as well, so let's just put pole. A number of us would have had, me included, would have had hopes of a slightly different result after the practice. Specifically practice 1 and even more so practice 2. And that's not necessarily because Red Bull was sandbagging. I think it's down more to a mistake that Mercedes made with their cooling for their engine, which meant it overheated a lot during the race, which slowed them down. But anyway, my overriding impression of the race, I don't begrudge Verstappen winning. I don't begrudge Red Bull getting a 1-2. If that's what they deserve, then that's what they deserve. They've got the better car. They went a bit of a radical route with their car design, just like Mercedes did 2 years ago. Red Bull seem to have made it work. Yeah, so I don't begrudge Red Bull at all, or Verstappen, but it's a shame that it feels like an extra round in the 2023 championship rather than a fresh new start in 2024. There were 23 races, I think, weren't there? 23, or was it 22 in 2023? Anyway, if there were 22, this feels like round 23 in the 2023 championship. Everything seems to be pretty much the same. One guy out front, with Perez fighting with the McLarens, Aston Martins and Ferraris and Mercedes for best of the rest behind Verstappen. And that's pretty much what it was last year. So it's a bit disappointing because it doesn't feel fresh at all. But as I say, they deserve the win, clearly. Massive win, 22 seconds. That's Verstappen's 55th victory. Incredible, that. And his 31st pole position. No, 33rd, wasn't it? I won't write that just in case it's wrong, but I think it's his 33rd. Interestingly, there were no retirements for the first time in Bahrain. Just like for the first time ever, we got the same drivers in the same teams as the previous year. It's the first time that's ever happened as well. Plus, they all started on the same tyre compound. That's unusual too. They all started on softs. Actually, I don't know if that's unusual for Bahrain, but it's certainly unusual for most races. You normally get a few on the hards, a few on the mediums, well, most of them start on the medium, actually, most of the time. But anyway, that depends on the track, of course. So maybe Bahrain last year, they all started on softs, I'm not sure. Now, one thing I am quite happy about, simply from a personal point of view, is that I did predict, I know what you're going to say, so, you know, I will mention Leclerc's problems in a moment, but I did predict that Sainz would have the beating of Leclerc this season because the pressure would be off. He doesn't have to worry about following team orders. Doesn't have to worry about doing what the team say, anything like that. He can just go out there and have fun. He has no drive. You might argue that because he has no drive next year, that would actually increase his pressure, but I think it's the opposite. I think he drives with a certain freedom at Ferrari now, this year. And I think that was borne out. But yes, Leclerc did have problems with his brakes. One side of his brakes, I don't know if it was the front or the back or whether it was or left or right or what, but something was braking more than the other side. And it was turning the car. Whenever he braked, the car turned slightly. Not necessarily in the direction he wanted it to turn. So, yes, would Sainz have finished ahead of Leclerc without those problems? We just don't know. But there's no doubt that Sainz was super fired up, just as I thought he would be. And I think that's going to last the whole season. Sainz is going to be on fire. Perez, are we going to congratulate him for second place? No, because he is in clearly the best car on the grid. Some would say that the 22-second gap between, the 25-second gap between Verstappen and Sainz in third is all down to Verstappen and not down to the Red Bull. But I certainly don't think that. I think it's partially Verstappen, yes, but also partially Red Bull. I think there's no doubt Red Bull have the better car. That's borne out by Perez managing to come through and finishing second, basically, but only just ahead of Sainz. So no round of applause for Perez. I predicted he would get crushed this year by Verstappen to the extent where he would lose his drive, probably, I think, unless he's got a contract for 2025. If he doesn't have a contract for 2025, I think Perez is gone at the end of this year. I hope not, because I think he's really good, but he's just been crushed in Verstappen's team, which is what Red Bull is. I mean, Jos Verstappen seems to have a lot of sway in Red Bull. I have no idea why. I did hear that a lot of money was brought into the team when Verstappen first joined the Red Bull outfit with Toro Rosso, but I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, Jos seems to be a big part of the team. It's definitely Verstappen's team. So no applause for Perez, even though the team will obviously be very happy that he came back up to second place. Yeah, so the Mercedes, Russell was super quick. He was super quick early on. Now I thought Hamilton I thought Hamilton would have well and truly the beating of Russell this season, and I still think he will do, because I think Hamilton is driving with a freedom as well, similar to Sainz. So, and I think Hamilton would have beaten Russell had he not been tripped up by his qualifying. I think they had too much of a race set up on his car. Yes, Hamilton, I think, will have the beating of Russell all year, but he was made a mistake with their setup in qualifying, going by what Lewis himself has said. I think George may well have said it as well, that they set the car up more so for race pace, more so for the race than qualifying, but it ended up losing Hamilton loads more places in qualifying than he anticipated. And then, of course, that coupled with the overheating problem they had, because they had, again, their car set up for too much, or too little cooling, I should say, and it meant that the car was overheating, which was losing them at times about half a second a lap. So Russell was super quick early on, got up to second place, really competitive, and then from then on, from about lap 10 on, just slowed up basically. Same with Hamilton, although he did say that his last stint was his best stint, and he was closing on Norris at the end. But yeah, a bit of a disaster. The race setup didn't work in qualifying. That knocked Hamilton down. It didn't seem to cause a problem for Russell, but unless maybe... Oh no, actually, I think Russell went one way and Hamilton went the other. That's what Lewis said. So Hamilton went too much for a race setup. Russell went more for a quali setup, which is why Russell was 3rd on the grid. Hamilton was 9th on the grid. I think Hamilton was expecting to maybe be 5th on the grid, not 9th. Yeah, they're overheating problems. That's not a permanent problem, so that can easily be fixed for the next race. So the Mercedes will be a lot quicker from Saudi Arabia onwards, basically. McLaren's, well, they did have problems. What problems did Norris had? He had a problem, didn't he? What was the problem that he had? Oh, what was I can't. Wasn't to do with brakes, was it? Wasn't to do with gears, wasn't to do with engine cooling. I'm not entirely certain what it was to do with, but he had an issue during the race. That tripped him up a little bit. Piastri's main problem was that he had a long pit stop, and that allowed Hamilton to get past. Otherwise, Hamilton would have probably finished behind Piastri. Alonso had a very lackluster race. Just fell back down the field. It took ages for Hamilton to get past Alonso, but once he did, Alonso just fell off basically. Stroll came through from his spin at the beginning, which put him down to last place, and he came through to finish 10th, which was fantastic. And he was higher than that actually, at least 9th, maybe 8th. At one point, Alonso maybe just down to pit stops. Towards the end, Alonso got past. Different tyre strategy, so he was allowed past, I think, by Stroll. But yeah, fantastic performance, I think, by Stroll to get up to 10th, and it meant that we had 5 teams in the top 10 points. Redbull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, which again reflects how this is just seems like an extension of the 2023 season rather than something new in 2024. Joe, best of the rest, very good performance in his Stake F1 kick Sauber. Very good. Very good for me for remembering that as well. Magnussen held off Ricciardo and Tsunoda. There's a bit of grievance between those two. There was a bit of argy-bargy, a little bit of name-calling, a little bit of tension between Ricciardo and Tsunoda after the race, because Ricciardo feels that Tsunoda should have let him through earlier so that he could attack Magnussen to get the coveted 12th place. And Tsunoda was annoyed at the thought that he should even have to hand over the place to Ricciardo. So a lot of tension between Tsunoda. He's very feisty on the radio. He comes across so meek and mild and loves his teammates, and almost cried when Gasly left the team last year. But was it last year? No, the year before last, wasn't it? 2 years ago, the end of 2022, I think. But in the car, he's super aggressive on the radio anyway. Albon, a standard sort of place for Albon. He does normally finish 11th actually, so that's not quite so great, but still way better than Sargent, who had all sorts of problems during the weekend. And what did he do? What did Sargent do? Did he have a spin? Oh no, he had a car problem, didn't he? He had a car issue. What was happening? Something was sticking. Something was failing on his car, so he went off the track. So he then had to come in. Oh, and have his steering wheel. His steering wheel wasn't turning, or was turning of its own accord, or something like that. Hulkenberg. Now he had what happened to him at the beginning? Oh yeah, of course he qualified really well in 10th. Fantastic performance in 10th place on the grid, way well clear of Magnussen. But he then had that. He was then spun around. I'm not sure who spun him around, or if he spun himself around. But he got spun around at the start, and then he came in immediately, I think, for tyres. Did he have to come in? I'm not sure, but he changed onto hards. And then he was nowhere, basically. But he still finished ahead of Ocon and Gasly. How bad is that? Ocon and Gasly, who qualified 19th and 20th. And they finished 17th and 18th, only ahead of Bottas, who had nearly a minute in the pits due to a cross-threaded wheel nut. cost him about a minute in the pits, and of course Sargent, who had all his problems. So they're the only people that managed to finish behind Ocon and Gasly. Even Hülkenberg, with his problems at the start, even finished ahead of them. Terrible, but Alpine will get on top of that, I'm sure. I still think Alpine will finish 6th in the championship. Yeah, so Max, what an easy race he had. He didn't. You can tell when someone's in total control because he didn't have to stop for tyres when everybody else did. He was just happy going along on his softs for a long time after everybody else came in and changed to hards. And then on the last pit stop, the Red Bulls didn't have any hard tyres left, so they actually went onto softs for the last 17-18 laps. So much confidence, they just went onto soft tyres. Everybody else was on hards, and they still won comfortably, and Perez still got through to 2nd place. So what else? I've made some little notes here, but I think I've sort of covered everything. My driver of the day. Now, it's a bit presumptuous for me. I am just a simple F1 fan. I mean, I've got lots of experience of watching Formula 1. I've been watching it every race since 1982. 82, the year that Keke Rosberg won the championship. I've been watching every race since about halfway through the 1982 season. Before that, I was probably only watching the British Grand Prix for a few years before that. But so I have a lot of experience of watching it, but I'm certainly not up with all the tech knowledge. But still, I will, for what it's worth, do a driver of the day. I think for me it's between driver of the weekend. Hülkenberg would be a contender because of his qualifying. I think Stroll did really well in the race. Joe did really well in the race. It would have to be between Sainz and Verstappen for driver of the day, and I think I'm going to give it to Sainz because yes, Leclerc was hampered, but he did have to get past Leclerc, and Leclerc certainly defended well. He had to get past Leclerc twice. He also had to get past Russell as well. Although Russell was having his own issues as well, wasn't he? There's no real standout driver of the day, I have to say, because Verstappen beating Perez by 22 seconds is not a massive achievement for Verstappen. So I think Sainz does edge it for driver of the day, but not massively so because of the problems Leclerc had. So there you go. Let's hope that the next race in Saudi Arabia does actually feel like a race from a new season rather than just an extension of 2023. Okay, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so. Or like the video, or comment on the video, or even leave a tip. There's a little thanks button underneath the video. But the best thing you can do is simply watch the videos. Thank you very much. And I will see you on the very next one, which might be Saudi Arabia, or it might be a completely different subject. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.